Let me tell you a story. It is about an old beef that happened nearly over 20 years ago involving Deion Sanders and the now late Marty Schottenheimer. And this occurred in the 2002 NFL season. Deion Sanders was once going to actually suit up and play for the 2002 Oakland Raiders on their Super Bowl run. I'm going to tell you the story about how petty Marty was and how he blocked it and stopped this tremendous signing from occurring that may have actually turned the tides for the 2002 Raiders. I'm your host, Bearded Aquarium. Welcome to ATC. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we're going to go ahead and get started right now. Let's go. All right, let me take you back to 2001 because that is when the beef first started between Marty Schottenheimer and Deion Sanders. So we all know who Deion Sanders is, Deion Sanders, aka Primetime. And Deion's played for the course of his NFL career for several NFL teams, most notably the Atlanta Falcons, who drafted him originally. He's played for the Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers, where he won world championships respectively. Now, he's at the tail end of his career in Dallas in 1999, and let's be honest, the 1999 version of Deion Sanders wasn't the 1993 or the 1994 or 95 version, in which, in my opinion, he was at the apex of in his prime, pun intended. And he goes and signs this massive 7-year, $56 million deal with the Washington Redskins. And he's coached by Norv Turner for that long season. And Norvell Turner, who used to be the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys during their dynasty years, they only do a mediocre 8-8. So they end the season at 500. So Daniel Snyder, who used to own the Redskins, was this hell-bent owner who has deep pockets, and whatever he wants, he usually goes out and gets. So he decides to sign Deion, as I stated, finish 8-8. So now you have Marty Schottenheimer. Now let me play this clip of Marty Schottenheimer so you can kind of get an idea of how disciplinary he is and how straightforward he is and how just micromanaging he is. Check this brief clip out.
There's a gleam, man. There's a gleam. Let's get the gleam, all right? Let's go.
Okay, so now that you saw that clip, I'm pretty certain that you could tell that it's like night and day in terms of their personalities, and usually personalities that differ, there's going to be some type of clashing. And so I could tell you again, that's why I showed that clip to bring context on what we're dealing with. Now I want you to look at the image I got on the screen, and this is an old classic. This is Office Space, but this is Mr. TPS. And to me, that's how Marty was, or at least he appeared to be on the outside. Now I'm just a casual fan, but he just looked like this disciplined guy, overly disciplined, and not only that, super duper a micromanager. And everybody knows that Deion, you cannot keep Deion in a box. You're not going to be able to do that. And so let me tell you what ensued and what led up to the beef, and how I think ultimately Marty got back at Deion and actually got the last laugh. So it's now summertime in 2001. The the Washington football team, they need to report to training camp. Now, part of the contract that Deion had, or the stipulation in the contract, was that you don't have to report to training camp or OTAs and certain other team activities as long as you're playing Major League Baseball. So what Deion does, Deion gets this eureka moment and says, okay, because he simply just doesn't want to play for Marty, as I already talked about, and you already saw the Gleam clip. He actually signs with the Cincinnati Reds, and he goes and he plays for a little over 30 games, and he wasn't completely terrible, but he batted under 200. And you're not going to last long in the major leagues if you're batting under 200. 300 is considered to be all-star worthy quality material, but he's batting, I believe, at 173, so they let him go. So Deion still says, hey, I still got more tricks up my sleeve because I just don't want to play for this guy. I just don't like this guy. So what Deion does, Deion proceeds to go to the Toronto Blue Jay organization, and he played not a lesser role, but he played in an affiliate league and just didn't do well, and they got rid of him, and then he signed some autographs, and you can look up this story. And he went on about his merry way. So now he has the dilemma, because now what Deion has to do is either report to camp, or he has to forfeit or give up a large sum of his signing bonus. Now remember, he signed a 7-year, $56 million deal with an $8 million signing bonus. And everybody knows football contracts not guaranteed, so you want to get the most money up front. So he has to make a decision if he's going to show up to camp. And so what Deion decides to do is because again, he's made so much money in his career because Deion doesn't know how to play the game on and off the field. Deion decides to actually wait to the very last minute. He kept Daniel Snyder pacing, everybody in suspense. And he decides to say, hey, you know what? He calls his agent faxes over the retirement papers, and then Deion, because Deion just balling like that, writes a partial check or a check and gives them back some of their signing bonus. Now, who in their right mind would give something back, not unless it's that bad or perceived to be that bad? So he gives half of the money back, or a considerable portion of the $8 million guaranteed signing bonus. He gives that back. So he gives it back. He decides he retires from football. And here's what happens next. I want to remind you how Marty is. Check this out.
Gleam, man. There's a gleam.
Okay, so Deion is retired, and the Redskins actually hold his rights. Now, in the year 2002, Deion Sanders was a analyst for the NFL Today on CBS, along with Jim Nantz, Phil Simms, and Boomer Esiason. And so I distinctively remember in around, I believe, the last quarter of the season, which was in December, he clearly talked about wanting to suit up, that his agent or his people had reached out to the Oakland Raiders at the time. And basically they were putting together a contract for him to sign on at the latter part of the year before the deadline so that he could help the Raiders get that elusive ring, because the Raiders hadn't won a Super Bowl since Super Bowl 18 when Marcus Allen was the MVP way back in the day. So I remember, and I'm going to quote Deion, and this is what Deion says, because Deion just has that swagger. And he talks about that, hey, he could get literally right off this desk and cover right now. And Boomer Esiason backs him up on that, right? It's jovial, it's playful, but Deion was dead serious. And so I kind of started to raise my eyebrow and say, hey, wait a minute, because we got some people that's injured. Charles Woodson has a broken leg. Torrey James has a broken leg. And I can guarantee you that if Deion Sanders signs with the Raiders, that's going to be almost like when Mike Haynes signed with the Raiders back in the day in the 83 season in week 8, after there was some sort of player dispute with the Players Association in the league, and it went to arbitration, and the Raiders eventually won. Mike Haynes came over. That solidified their season, because you had to pick your poison. You could not throw on either side of the field, because you had Lester Hayes and you had Mike Haynes. But circling back around, you at this particular time, you still would not dare throw it on Deion's side. And so that would immensely help the Raiders as they got to the playoffs. Obviously, they shellacked the Jets. They initially struggled sort of in the first half with the Titans. They figured it out. They end up getting back to the Super Bowl. But this was all for naught, because if you remember, the Redskins hold his rights. And so the Redskins released him from his rights to that team. Now, what happens is other teams can put in a claim to claim that player off of waivers. And so none other than Marty Schottenheimer, because he only did a year in Washington. They finished 8-8, no love lost. He goes to San Diego in 2002. The Raiders, in which that's Marty's probably biggest enemy. He hated the Raiders. He's the person that came up with the term Raider Week. And so he starts rubbing his hands. He's like, wait a minute, I can inflict harm to the Raiders, who I hate, who I dominated with the Kansas City Chiefs for nearly a decade. Then I can also get back at prime time, because now he won't have an opportunity to get his third Super Bowl ring. And so you obviously know what happened. He claimed Deion, or the San Diego Chargers claimed Deion off of waivers. And so if you go back and remember, Barry Sanders had a similar situation where Barry Sanders had a list of teams he wanted to play for, and the Raiders were at the top of the list in the year 99 or year 2000, and the Lions refused to relinquish his rights because he could have signed with the Raiders, because you get put on waivers and any team can claim you. And so several other teams also tried to make a bid, but this most significant one was San Diego because they claimed him. And so in the end, Marty, because they didn't like each other, Marty got the last laugh. Marty Schottenheimer blocked Deion Sanders for playing for the 2002 AFC champion Raiders, who ultimately ran into their coach or former coach and John Gruden. I do believe that Bill Callahan did sabotage that game, but let me know and let's engage in the thoughts. Do you think Deion would have made a difference if that would have occurred? And maybe if he would have come back another year with the Raiders or another team, because remember, he played for the Ravens for 2 seasons as well, and he moved to safety, but he was still pretty darn good. So let's engage in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts. This is Bearded Aquarium for All Things Considered. I will see you on the next video.